So hi everyone. I think some of you know me, some of you might have been to my classroom classes. A few weeks ago, I can't remember how many now, I did a demonstration of this. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. So that's a Quilt As You Go. It's easy to quilt something like that, as Emma says, because you've only got that small piece under your machine. And through lockdown, I've been doing a few classes with people and realizing that they're going to be at home to lay out. I've done a couple of Quilt As You Go quilts, and this is one of them. And what I've done with this one is I've joined it with matching strips, sashing, so that you don't really notice it as much. I'm just going to take it to the other camera and take the other camera close to give you a close-up. Sorry if this makes you a bit seasick. I've just got to unwrap the... Okay, so can you see it's joined with sashing? And it's grey strips of sashing that match the triangles. So this whole quilt was done block by block and then joined with sashing strips. So let me put this back now. Sorry. Is that back in the right place? I hope so. Yeah. And then that's not the one I'm going to show you though, because camera, integrated camera. This is the other one that we did. Let me get it the right way up. And this is a similar thing, but the blocks are set on point. So we did, we got that in the right place. Can you see it? Oh yeah, okay. Okay, so we did different blocks with different techniques, some applique, some Quilt As You Go, some foundation paper piecing, and a confetti tree there, and all put together with this sashing, narrow sashing. Now it has to be, to make it easy, it has to be narrow. You can do wider sashing, but it means you have to fiddle around with different widths. So it's easiest to do it. And what I'm going to demonstrate on is the second quilt. So these are the second ones that I've got. That I've put them all in different, and that's going to be joined onto there now. So, no, that way. That's going to be joined onto there. So those two are going to be joined. And here we go. Pins everywhere. Let's go to the other camera. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I did clicked the wrong thing. Oh, technology. Okay. So it's pretty important, especially when it's on point, to make sure you have got it the right way, because it's very easy, and to check that your pieces are the same length. Actually, that does look a tad bigger. It's all right, I can trim that afterwards. So what you need is a strip that is 1 inch wide. Now the reason for it being 1 inch wide is you're going to take a 1/4 inch seam here, 1/4 inch seam off of this, and a 1/4 inch seam off of that, so that they butt together and you don't have a gap in the wadding. And when you take 2 1/4 inch seams off either side of that, you need the 1/2 inch to cover it. So a 1 inch strip for the front, For the back, you need a 1 3/4 inch strip, folded in half and pressed in half. And the other really crucial thing with these strips is that you have to best press them. Best press the life out of them. Use lots of best press, because what happens, it's not such a big deal when you're doing the short one here, but when you're doing the long strips to join your strips together, it can be quite difficult, not difficult exactly, but fiddly, because it stretches, these stretch. So best press them and give yourself the best chance of doing it. I tend to cut them just like a 1/4 inch each end, a bit longer than you want, so that piece for the back. So here we go, right side to right side, and we'll just pin that. And you've got to be really accurate here. No slapdash, near enough is good enough. We want it beautifully, perfectly accurate, because it's 1 inch and your seams are going to be 2/4 inches, and there's just no room for errors. So pin the front on and then pin the back on. You could pin them both at the same time, but you got too many things going on then. I find it easier to pin them separately. And again, accuracy is critical.
So the back one, you're folding with it folded in half. You're pinning
the back one
to the
back. The back one's folded in half, and the raw edge is to the edge. The folded edge is going to fold out. Yeah. Actually, when you cut this, I'm doing this by machine. I'm finishing it by machine, which is why I've cut it 1 3/4. If you wanted to finish it by hand, you would cut it 1 1/2. My mat that my machine is on is a Quilt As You Go mat that has been finished by hand. Ooh, the back looks a bit manky. It's because I keep sliding it. Because that's finished by hand, because it's a small piece, I finished it by hand, and used a few scraps up. Just put that away. It's good to have your machine on a mat like this if you're going to do what I do and slide it around all the time. I need my 1/4 inch foot. And I'm going to stitch. Now I'm using a slightly longer stitch length than usual because I'm going through a lot of thicknesses here. I've got 1, 2 wadding, 3, 4, 5. 5 thicknesses of fabric and 1 of wadding. So slightly longer stitch length is good. And take your time and just be as accurate as you can. I find, where's my quick unpick gone? Lost it, there it is. I probably shouldn't do this, but I do. I use my quick unpick to just hold it in position as it goes. the back. I should get my setup organised like Jenny Doan and have a camera at the back here somewhere so you can see better, but hopefully you can see well enough. Right, so that's the front and the back on. And I'm now going to stitch the other piece, where have I put it? Oh, down here, onto the front and leave the back folded back. So what I'm going to do is just finger press that front. Just to get it nice and creased. And I'm going to make sure, double sure that, wait a minute.
Ran one more, I think. Yeah.
Sorry?
It was ran one more like that. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm just going, that's the top corner. That's the top corner and that's the top corner. All my top corners, the top left. I have done it. I have done it and then had to unpick. You only do it once. Okay. So right sides together. And be careful to line up because you want that nice straight line. So make sure the block is, you know, you've got it all matched and lined up. Oh, I'm doing it from the wrong side. Sorry, do it from this side. No, that's not right. Move along a bit. That's it. So pin both ends and make sure you've got them, the ends matching, and then you can get your center. Just check before I, yeah. That's not quite perfect, but it will be when I've fiddled with it.
This is where you were saying it's worth taking the time to
Yeah.
actually get it like that, because I probably would have just pinned it and got on with it and then had to.
Well, you've got to remember that you're sewing together in a strip and doing the shorter ones, you know, it's not a problem. But when you come to sew this strip to the next strip, if you've not got a straight line through here, then you've got a problem to deal with. So solve those problems before you even get to them by making sure that it's accurate at the start and the finish. So a 1/4 inch foot is really very useful for this, because that needs to be, if you take bigger than a 1/4 inch, what happens is your seam allowances try to overlap and you get a big bulky mess. And if you take too small a seam allowance, you get a gap, which is the thin spot, which is not great to have in your quilt. So you've got to be as accurate as you can possibly be. Sometimes when you start a seam, your fabric doesn't want to go forward, and that's because the fabric's not connecting with all of the feed teeth. It's only connecting with half of the feed teeth. So you've got to help it through a little bit. If it doesn't want to go, either pull on the strings at the back or needle up and move it forward a bit. And you only need to do that once or twice possibly and it'll go. But don't just put your foot down and give it welly, because in that situation you just get a big build up of thread.
That's when you get the lovely bird's nest on the back of it, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Depends on what 1/4-inch foot you've got, but I find that the foot rests underneath this seam allowance quite nicely. If you try and put it on top, it pushes things to one side. See what I mean? Does that make sense? Or am I talking gibberish?
No, I think what you're saying is that this piece, this side is loose from behind, isn't it? You're not trapping it underneath the foot.
Well, this seam allowance is, because you've taken 1/4 inch and it's folded back, you've only got a 1/2 inch here, and the feet on the machine you've got a choice. You can either have it on top of that seam allowance like that. Can you see that?
Yeah, well, I can see it, but then I do know what I'm looking for, so maybe.
Oops.
That's it.
Okay, so that's on top of the seam allowance or underneath the seam allowance.
And it runs better underneath like that.
Underneath, yeah. If it's on top of the seam allowance, oops, get me. All right. If it's on top of the seam allowance, it tries to fall off and push the fabric to one side or another. But if you've got a wide foot, you might not have a choice. Different machines have different setups, different feet. So it's something that you might need to just do a trial run, a test with. Or if you've not got this kind of 1/4 inch foot on your machine, most makes supply them. So have a look in the manufacturer's catalogue. Because I know Bernina's standard 1/4 inch foot doesn't have this vertical bit here, and it's wider generally. But you can buy one for a Bernina that's like this. Okay, I've been chattering away and I've lost my little slicks. There they are. How did they get round the back there? Goodness Lord knows. Okay. Now, I've got to plug the iron in. Get my little ironing pad. Because now we open it out and we see whether our seam has been a 1/4 inch or not. And you might want to pull it because it will naturally want to overlap. So we're going to press those flat. Wow, I just ironed the cord then. Was a bit foolish.
Not a good idea.
Don't steam, because if you steam it, you'll steam your wadding flat. Just dry iron the back first and then the front. And then the back again, but this time pushing this folded piece over. And you'll need to give it a little tug to make sure it's covering this seam. So if you wanted to hand sew, you would have cut this back piece slightly narrower and it should just come to the seam allowance. So you can then just slip stitch along that. But it's a lot of stitching if you do it by hand, because it's not just these short rows, it's the long rows to join them together. Unplug the iron. Yes. And this is the next bit. Right. I tried it first with Wait a minute, which way do I like to do it? I like to do it that way. I tried it first with the stitch in the ditch foot, but the stitch in the ditch foot didn't get it as close as I wanted to get it. So I'm just pinning this now, and can you see? I've got just 1/8 of an inch overlap. And if you're careful and accurate with your seam allowances, you get a nice straight 1/8 of an inch overlap all the way along. Okay. Okay, that one is perhaps a little bit less. So I'm just going to give it a little tweak because I'm like that. I tweak things. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. So here we go again, and we're going to change the foot to the general purpose but plastic fronted foot. You could use an open toe foot for this. I don't, because although I love my Brother machine, it does have a little quirk in that it occasionally miss stitches with that open toe foot. So I use this general purpose one, and it's got plastic on the front and it's open enough that I can see what I'm doing. So I'm using navy thread because I'm lazy. I don't want to change the thread every 2 minutes while I'm doing this. I normally would, if I'm stitching in the ditch like this, I would normally change the thread to whatever the background is here, so, which would be a cream. But I've discovered that if you keep it close, oh, come on, press the wrong button then. If you keep it close, then you just don't see it. Take it steady and just stitch right in the ditch. A little bit of concentration is good for the brain. Good for mine anyway.
You're using your open toe foot there. Could you use a walking foot if you're going through so many layers, or why wouldn't you use a walking foot?
Because I need to use the 1/4 inch foot to do the other bit, and to put the walking foot on and then take it off and put it on and take it off would be a nightmare. You could use a walking foot if you wanted to do all the stages except this bit on all of the blocks. You could use a walking foot, but well, there's no need for it because this is working perfectly well. What you could do if you're worried about getting the accuracy is not stitch in the ditch at all, but actually stitch on the sashing using one of your fancy decorative stitches. Or you could top stitch, narrow top stitch either side of the sashing. Okay, so there I am.
On the left are applique. They do look like they're applique. Is that correct? So,
sorry, what, the
tulip blocks?
Oh, the tulip. Yeah, that's an applique. Yeah, and so's the washing line. That's an applique. And no, I didn't. And I've used some of the fancy stitches around here, so it would be quite nice to do a fancy stitch down here. So there you go. That's the, let's see if I can you see that line of stitching, navy on navy?
You can barely see it, yeah.
No, but well, maybe I should have used a contrast thread so that you could see it.
You'd
But
have had to unpick it again.
Then I'd have had to unpick it, yeah, and I'm not about to do that.
No.
So this is going to be, this is the second quilt like this, and I've only got it because I was demonstrating online some of these blocks. So I'm just going to whack it together and give it to Linus, I think. Because you don't want two the same, do you? So that's how you do it. And then when you've got your others all together, you do the same thing, but a lot longer. And then you have to be careful to match your cross joints, which is probably the fiddliest thing in the whole process. So let me just make you all seasick again and show you the one on the wall. So this one I didn't match. So you can see that these all set on a point, and when you get to the edge here, it just crosses, and then your binding sort of matches because it's narrow and the same color. So that was a fun quilt to do.
It looks stunning as well.
It was, yeah, it was a lot of fun. Look at the hedgehog. Look at my little hedgehog. Isn't he cute? I love my little hedgehog. Yeah, so and that block was nice too with the butterflies.
Is that another applique one?
Yeah, it is, and I've put a few beads on it, and this is just stitching. So yeah.
So you can actually, it's a really good technique to sort of like do some really intricate small blocks that you can finish the block in one go like that, and then join it together rather than having to try to do all of that, you know, the detail of your extra quilting and your fancy stitches and that on a bigger project, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. See, this one, some of the quilting, which you can't really see on that camera, but you know, some of the quilting you wouldn't be able to do that on a if the thing was all together. Certainly this is, let's see if you can see, it's a Celtic knot pattern. It would be really difficult to do in on a full quilt. If you got, you know, a full quilt with wadding and backing, or to try and get through your machine with all those curves and round, you would really struggle to get the curves smooth. So doing it as a quilt as you go on a smaller block and joining it as I've done there is much easier. Okay, it's not dead simple. There's always something that you've got to struggle with. Wouldn't be life, would it, if there wasn't something to struggle with? But yeah, that's the way I put them together.